You'd think getting fired feels like an explosion, a dramatic slam of the door, or at least a shouting match. For me, it was worse. It was quiet. Just a thin envelope on my desk, a muttered apology from a boss who didn't look me in the eye, and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as everything I thought I was slipped away. So, naturally, the next day I found myself in a place I never imagined. The town's old library, a crumbling relic with dust floating like ghosts in the light. And there between stacks of forgotten paperbacks and the smell of faded ink I met him. His name was Caleb. I noticed him before he noticed me. He was perched on a wooden ladder, reshelving books with the kind of concentration that made you think he was repairing stained glass windows instead of handling dog-eared novels. His sweater hung loose, sleeves rolled up just enough to show lean wrists, veins faintly visible like lines of a secret map. And when he glanced down at me, his hazel eyes caught the weak light and somehow turned it into warmth. New guy. His voice was calm, with a teasing lilt that made me feel both exposed and oddly safe. I swallowed, shifting the clipboard the head librarian had shoved into my hands. Yeah, just temporary. Don't get too attached. He smirked. We'll see about that. It's funny how one sentence can strike like lightning. I laughed it off, pretended it didn't linger in the air between us, but deep down something had already begun to shift. The truth was, I wasn't looking for anything. I was barely holding myself together, rent overdue, confidence shattered, pride scattered like broken glass. I was just a man trying to survive one humiliating day after another. But Caleb, he looked at me like I wasn't broken, like I wasn't some failed 30-year-old who had crashed and burned. Maybe that's why I couldn't stop watching him. The library was quiet most days, the kind of quiet that forces you to hear your own thoughts. But when Caleb was around, silence didn't feel so heavy. He hummed sometimes, soft and aimless, while typing on the computer. He asked about my life in ways that weren't small talk, and when I deflected, he didn't push, just waited, like time was on his side. One afternoon, as rain streaked the windows, he handed me a book. The cover was worn, the spine cracked. This one saved me, he said. I raised a brow. From what? He tilted his head, considering. From myself, mostly. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but instead, I flipped the book open, the pages smelling of dust and something faintly sweet, like old wood soaked in sunlight. For the first time in weeks, my chest loosened. We began working side by side, day after day. Sometimes our hands brushed when reaching for the same book. Sometimes, his laugh cracked through the stillness, and I found myself smiling before I realized it. Sometimes, he looked at me too long, like he was memorizing the lines of my face. And sometimes I let him. But if this sounds easy, like fate wrapped us neatly in its arms, it wasn't. One night, after closing, I found myself staring at my reflection in the library's glass door. My clothes hung wrong, my hair unkempt, my eyes hollow. What did Caleb see in me? Why was he so kind? People don't just walk into your life and hand you hope like it's free. There's always a cost. Always. When I turned, Caleb was behind me, holding his jacket, his gaze softer than I could stand. You okay? He asked. I almost lied, almost told him I was fine. But something about the way his voice folded around me broke my defenses. No, I admitted, my throat tight. I'm really not. Caleb stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that I felt the air shift between us. His eyes searched mine, not pitying, not judgmental, just searching. Then let me be here, he said simply. Those words hit harder than the firing letter, harder than the silence of my apartment, harder than the shame I carried like a second skin. Let me be here. Scared me, because what if he meant it? The following week, our routine deepened. I started noticing the way Caleb's fingers drummed against the desk when he was lost in thought, the way he tucked his hair behind his ear when reading, the way his smile curved when he caught me staring. And God, I stared too much. One slow evening, while shelving in the far corner where no one ever went, we ended up trapped in the same narrow aisle. He was carrying a stack of hardcovers. I was balancing a pile of returns, and suddenly we were chest to chest. The air charged. Excuse me? I mumbled, stepping sideways. But he didn't move. His eyes flicked down to my lips, then back up, and the world tilted. For a second, I thought he would kiss me. My pulse pounded so loud I swore the books could hear it. Instead, he leaned close enough that his breath brushed my cheek. "You don't have to keep pretending you don't feel it too," he whispered. And then he stepped back, leaving me clutching my stack of books like a lifeline, my whole body trembling. I didn't sleep that night, because he was right. My chest ached with something I hadn't felt in years: hope, fear, longing, all tangled into a knot I couldn't untie. I had built my life around walls, armor, sarcasm, anything to keep people at a distance. But Caleb? He wasn't knocking on the door. He was already inside. The next day, I tried to play it cool. I told myself it was nothing, gone innocent spark, a fleeting moment. But every time our eyes met across the dusty shelves, every time his hand brushed mine when we passed books, I felt the truth pressing harder. And the truth terrified me. One evening, after we closed, the storm outside knocked out the power. The library sank into darkness, lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights. Caleb and I sat near the circulation desk, listening to the rain pound the windows. "You look like you're about to jump out of your skin," he said gently. "I'm fine," I muttered. He tilted his head, studying me. "You don't always have to be fine." Something inside me cracked. The darkness made it easier to confess, the rain covering the tremor in my voice. "I lost everything, Caleb. My job, my sense of direction, my worth. And now you're here, looking at me like I'm someone I'm not. Like I deserve." I trailed off, my throat closing. "Like you deserve love?" he finished softly. I couldn't answer. My eyes burned, my chest heaved, and for the first time in years, I let someone metrally see me. Caleb reached out, his hand brushing mine, hesitant but steady. That simple touch felt like a lifeline. "Let me in," he whispered. I didn't kiss him that night. Couldn't. But when I walked home in the rain, I realized something. The walls I had spent years building were beginning to crumble, and I wasn't sure I wanted to stop it. Days turned into weeks, and the library became more than a job, it became a sanctuary. Caleb and I found a rhythm, unspoken but undeniable. He shared his favorite books, stories that mirrored pieces of his soul, and in return, I let slip fragments of mine. But the closer we grew, the more my fear sharpened. What if this was temporary? What if I ruined it like I ruined everything else? One Friday evening, after a long shift, Caleb asked if I wanted to grab dinner. My instinct was to say no, to retreat, but the hope in his eyes disarmed me. We ended up at a small diner on the edge of town, the kind with neon lights buzzing overhead and waitresses who called everyone Han. Caleb ordered pancakes at 8 p.m. and grinned when I raised a brow. "Life's too short to follow the rules," he said, his smile daring me to disagree. And somehow, in that greasy booth, with syrup-stained menus and the hum of old country music, I really laughed for the first time since losing my job. Later, walking back through the quiet streets, our hands brushed once, twice, before finally intertwining. My heart thundered, my skin tingled, and for a moment, the world narrowed down to just him and me. But happiness has a way of scaring the broken parts of you. The next day, panic set in. I pulled away, avoided his gaze, busied myself with shelving. Caleb noticed, of course he did. Finally, in the far corner of the library, he cornered Menet with anger, but with quiet resolve. "Why are you running from this?" he asked. "Because it's too good," I blurted. "Because you're too good, and I'll ruin it. I always ruin it." Caleb stepped closer, his eyes steady, his voice calm. "You don't scare me, and you're not broken. You're just scared of being seen." His words pierced deeper than any insult ever could. I wanted to push him away, but instead, I crumbled. Tears I hadn't shed in years spilled down my face, and Caleb caught me before I fell apart completely. He held me, no questions, no conditions, just warmth and patience. And in his arms, I realized maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to fight alone anymore. The turning point came on a quiet Sunday. The library was empty, sunlight slanting through the dusty windows, painting everything gold. Caleb was reading at the desk, his brow furrowed in concentration. I watched him, heart aching with something I could no longer deny. "Caleb," I said, my voice trembling. He looked up, and before I lost my courage, I crossed the room and kissed him. It wasn't graceful. My lips trembled, my hands shook, but the moment his mouth met mine, the world dissolved. It was heat and softness, fear and release, everything I had bottled up spilling into that single touch. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, Caleb rested his forehead against mine. "Took you long enough," he teased, but his voice was thick with emotion. I laughed through the tears, and for the first time, I believed I could be happy. Of course, life didn't magically fix itself overnight. I still had bills, uncertainty, insecurities that clung like shadows. But with Caleb beside me, the weight felt bearable. Weeks later, as autumn leaves scattered across the sidewalks, the head librarian informed me my temporary position could become permanent. It wasn't the career I once imagined, but somehow it felt right. That evening, Caleb and I sat outside the library steps, sipping coffee from paper cups. The air was crisp, the sky streaked with orange and pink. "Funny," I said. "Losing my job felt like the end of everything. But maybe it was just the beginning." Caleb squeezed my hand, his smile quiet but certain. "Sometimes life breaks us so we can rebuild. Stronger, better." I looked at him, the man who had seen me at my lowest, who stayed, who believed when I couldn't stand for the first time in years, the future didn't terrify me. Because whatever came next, I wasn't facing it alone. And in that moment, sitting beside him as the world turned golden, I knew the truth. Love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes, it sneaks in quietly, between dusty shelves and whispered words, until one day you realize it has changed everything. Forever. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.